I thought we could begin maybe perhaps with a game. Okay, so there was a species that was described maybe a decade or so ago. I'll start reading the description,
Okay.
and when you spot it, maybe
Okay.
let me know if you know what species I'm talking about.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
At what point can I ask for clues?
No, so I'll be reading the
Okay. You just give.
description. I'll
Cool.
read the description to you, and
Okay.
you can ask for clues. You can cut me off if you spotted the
Okay.
species, right? It was described for the first time maybe a decade or so ago,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll
cool.
just read the description.
Yeah.
A 175 centimeter long specimen weighing 55 kgs, idiotic looking, hair color black, old fashioned
That's me.
hairstyle,
That's me.
and tiny brown colored eyes distinguished him in the field. Found in almost every biotope, shows a preference for the habitats existing in Kana, Tadoba, and Painch, though his true home is in one corner of Nagpur. An extremely rare species, perhaps only one remaining in the entire world. Status critically endangered but completely unprotected, not included in any of the schedules of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Habits mainly diurnal, may become nocturnal if rate of human interference is low in the night, doesn't like to sleep much except in the classroom, and is an active species, largely antisocial and solitary. Not much known about his behavior, as he is shy, literally. Specimen.
So this
Interesting.
is a description I wrote during my school days or college days. A lot has changed since then, and I don't think I'm shy anymore.
I think COVID did that to you.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of made you an accidental science communicator. Okay, so so I actually brought this up because I wanted to talk to you about your early days getting into the science of it, because I've heard uh, different reasons as to why you got into bat biology and bats in general. Um, of course, there is uh, your first time seeing a tiger in Nagzira. It could also be you were living in Nagpur and on the way to the high court, or your high court was on the way and you spotted bats on the way. So there are different descriptions, but I actually wanted to start talking to you maybe about your sibling. Of
Okay.
course, I mean, you would agree that he's maybe a little more famous and even
Absolutely.
smarter than you are. And of course, I'm talking about Network Prakash Chakravarty. Could you talk to me about him and how he helped you
Okay.
discover bats?
I'm so glad that you brought this question up. And by the description of it, I wasn't sure whether I should be offended or not. But now that you've named the right sibling, I'm not at
Thank
all
you.
offended. And Natwar Prakash Chakravarty, short, Naughty, was our dog growing up. So if anybody was thinking of any other Chakravarty, that's not the case. So, Naughty and I almost grew up together. Naughty was brought home when I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And, but initially, we didn't bond all that much. My mother liked to keep our part of the house very clean, which meant that, dog's hair and everything was quite a deterrence for her. But later on, thankfully, growing up, what changed was once my aunt, who actually took care of Naughty, was went away for a month, and Naughty, out of everybody else in the house, at that point himself figured out that early morning, since the aunt is not there to walk him now, he's to find somebody else, and it turned out that that person was me. He
No.
just came into my room, um, not respecting any of the rules that had been set in the previous year. He came into my room, jumped on my bed, started licking my face early in the morning at around 6. I wasn't used to waking up at 6 at that time. So, and that's how I told my mother, look, now there's no option. We just have to, Noddy and I have to bond. And that's how it started. So that was the first animal in my life who really taught me how to love animals. And as I started loving wildlife, my fondness for my own pet also grew exponentially, because wildlife is something you go to watch. You don't hug wildlife; you watch them from a respectable distance. But then this is an animal that is really, just like a brother. So he has to be looked after and bonded with like a brother would. So that was Naughty and me.
How do you
And
not?
Naughty eventually lived for 17 years. So I saw him till the age of almost 20. Yeah.
Wow. And how do you not I mean, as a kid, of course, how do you not misconstrue that dog's willingness and almost demand for physical affection to not think that, okay, if I go in the wild and I see an animal and I shouldn't hug that animal? How does that kind of get inside you?
Yeah. So I think several factors. I think it's also about, and I think I would attribute most of it to people who were mentoring me, or wildlife TV shows and so on, for giving the right information. Because I think I didn't have the maturity to to process that with my own brain. So my brother, for example, he's and I'm now talking about my elder brother. Uh, Rohan Chakravarty, who's perhaps arguably the most famous Chakravarty. So Rohan was somehow very sensible from a very, very young age. For example, once when I was around 3 or 4, maybe, and I had almost like I threw a stone at a dog, at a stray dog. And that was the first time I did that. And Rohan was there, and he's 4 years older to me. So he was 7 or 8 at that time. And he said, why are you doing this? I mean, what do you gain out of doing this? You just, I mean, the dog is not doing anything. And that has stayed with me since then. So, so to have somebody like that as an elder sibling who loved animals and also knew how to respect animals was very important. And then wildlife, but applying the same logic to wildlife, I don't know where I got that from. I can't pinpoint a particular source, but I'm guessing maybe one of my aunts who was an avid wildlife, and in the other, and also we're talking about tigers and other wildlife. So it's very clear that we don't go close to those animals.
Of course. Yeah.
So we're talking about Central Indian wildlife, which can cause serious harm to you. So yeah, so that's I think that's how I would attribute a lot of it to my brother, to my elder brother.
And then, of course, there is that very important red letter day where you find, or Naughty finds a bat in the dustbin, and so there's an interesting descriptor there that your aunt was obviously, she opened the box or the dustbin, she sees there's a bat inside, she immediately closes it and is scared, and then she calls out to you,
Yeah.
which tells me that there was some inclination within you already at a very young age. You had a disposition to love animals. That an older woman thought to resort to the sensibilities of a kid to rescue that bat.
Yeah, so the timeline here is that we're talking about 2007. I'm so glad that you've really picked out all the things that I've said in different interviews in one day. So we're talking about an incident in 2007 now. 2005 was when I got interested in wildlife, when the whole Naxira tiger sighting happened. So from 2005 to 7, we had already founded a nature club in Nagpur, an informal nature club in Nagpur. So that information, and so we both my brother Rohan. Now to keep distinguishing my brother from the younger one, which I've never had to do before. So Rohan and I were already becoming, the wildlife lovers of the family. So anything wildlife related always came to us. So all the older people had lost the hierarchy that these are younger people. They always thought that, these are people who genuinely know something about wildlife that we don't. So that's how my aunt screamed out for both Rohan and me, and both of us rushed downstairs. And yeah, then my aunt had she had opened the lid of the dustbin. She had seen something inside. She closed the lid because she was so frightened. She called out to us. We did the same thing. We just opened it. We saw what's inside, and we closed it. It was almost like one of those Tom and Jerry Looney Tunes cartoons. And both my brother and I were like, no, what do we do now? What is this? I mean, there's a bat. I don't know. We've never handled. I mean, we hadn't handled a bat before. But we were like, what do we do with this? And then both of us decided that, okay, great. Let's do the simplest would be we take it upstairs to the terrace and gradually tilt the dustbin in such a manner that the bat automatically flies out. So that's what we did. But that moment is still etched in my memory of this bat having fed rotten bananas throughout the night, sitting aram se like a state with a pot belly and just looking at us. Amazing.
No, because the thing is that the beautiful words or the world of birds is already there. It's right outside, and you are a birder, and you do go out, and one of the other things that you do, and to get into this other world of bats seems very counterintuitive to a layman like me. But that's very interesting that how, because it's not a charismatic animal, it's not an umbrella species. So therefore, it's absolutely very, very interesting that somebody chooses a path in this. And of course, like I've heard you say that one of the reasons was that also you wanted to create a niche for yourself in something which was not hitherto unexplored. So that's also
Well,
great. Now I'll jump a little bit here and there, so forgive me. I'm not as
absolutely.
organized as you are,
No,
or
no. I talk the same way.
you're very good with dates,
I used to be.
and you're very good with cataloging like dates and things. What I'm trying to ask you is that is that a trait that has evolved out of your job of as a scientist, or were you already good at it?
I think I would say that science has made me forget what I was good at. So I think I used to be very good with dates until I became a scientist,
Hmm.
and maybe until my masters. I was very good with dates, particularly all the birthdays in July. July is when my birthday is, so I just
Oh wow,
remembered.
okay.
Yeah, we're in the same month
Oh,
now.
nice, nice.
So I remembered everybody's birthdays in July very well. And I, yeah, and all of these things that I'm telling you about, days when I got interested in wildlife, days when I saw a bat and everything, those are days and those are years and dates I still remember. But anything 2012 onwards, which is when I started my master's, I'm very bad at remembering. I
What?
don't know why.
Why?
I don't know. I think just more important things to remember these days. And the other thing is, of course, now you have Google Calendars and everything. So on the one hand, like, all if I really do want to wish somebody on their birthday, it's on my Google Calendar, which
Wow.
means it's out of my memory. So the phone reminds me. So that is also happening. Like this podcast, if there was no calendar invite, maybe I wouldn't remember it at all. So, that's so
Also,
more
are you
important things are remembered. Other things are left to technology.
are you good at pattern recognition?
No, not at all.
Do you
I
get
think
easily confused when you read the sonograms? I think that's what it's called, right?
no. So those I'm good at. I think good in the sense I think I'm not bad at it. And because it's just because I mean something I'm very interested in. I really want to know what bats are around me, so I go the extra mile to try and try and look for differences. But if it is for example, you give me photos of two different species of bats or birds or anything. Chances are that somebody else would pick differences between those two much faster than I would.
Really?
So, yeah, I think I don't have an artist eye. The artist eye has gone to somebody else in the family.
Hmm. Also, I think I mean we'll talk about the taxonomic nightmare, which is recognizing bats. But of course, before that, would you agree that perhaps your greatest talent or one of the greatest inner traits that has helped you progress in your career is that you're great at asking good questions?
Oh, wow, this is a tough podcast. I really should have thought about it before signing up.
No, no, I have
So,
other questions also, easier ones also, if you like.
no, I'm really enjoying this because it's very different. I think no, asking great questions. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I ask great questions. I've seen many other people be very fast at, finding out the right question. Uh, I think I don't think I ask great questions, but maybe what I do is I know, maybe not. No, I think this is, I don't think that's a talent. And if you ask me to identify a talent in myself, uh, don't misconstrue this for my modesty, but I genuinely don't know what my talent is. I would really like somebody else to tell me, but I haven't been able to figure out.
Can I
I
try?
think I do. Okay, okay.
Okay, because I've been, doing a little bit of research here and there. So
Yeah.
maybe uh, I had this question for somebody else as well, who I'd interviewed, this marine biologist who works in Antarctica. Like she's a
Mhm.
polar scientist. I also spoke to, by the way, Asim as well, who's also a marine biologist. There is this, I mean, I don't know if that's the right adjective, but uncontrolled curiosity, or I would say very precise curiosity that cannot be leashed in a way.
Yeah.
That I feel that you would be doing what you're doing even if you were not getting paid for it.
Maybe, maybe not. Actually, maybe not, because I'm a very practical person too. So, so if something, uh, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have the zeal to do what I'm doing without being paid as well. That is absolutely undeniable. I would have the zeal, I would have the passion to go out and study wildlife. But if it is not taking care of my bread and butter, I would find something else to do as well while trying to do this along the sides. But I'm a super practical person, and I don't think that's a talent, but maybe it is in today's world.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Your father disapproves initially of your choices, and you still do it. And I'm not saying that you come. I mean, who am I to say what means are? But you don't necessarily come from a family of many means. Your brother is a artist. I mean, of course, now he's world famous. But then, if somebody were to say that, oh yeah, by the way, I have two sons. One is an artist, and the other is running behind bats. I would be a little concerned too, right? And then so anybody who chooses to go in that career path has to have a little bit of either fearlessness or stupidity.
Yeah, and I think I've got the stupidity from my mother. I've got the practicality from my father. So and if you look at my elder brother, he leans more on the fearless and I wouldn't say stupid, but let's call him stupid. He's my brother after all. So he leans more on that spectrum. I lean more on the practicality spectrum. But if I didn't have my mother and if I didn't have my brother, maybe I would have just been completely practical like my father and would have chosen a path in business. So yeah, so I think anything that is non-practical in my life, I and if I followed my passion by being risky, uh, when I started working in Uttarakhand, that was all my calling. I did that. I took that risk by myself. But in most other cases, I have my brother to attribute it to my mother, and now my partner, who's also a scientist.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, we'll talk about moths as well, but um, so since I asked you a tough question, let me ask you a simpler question. Uh, how important is in bad research, of course, in bad biology and bad research, and especially field work, how important is Ludo King?
It's very important. It's very important. I mean, this is actually this is the most reflective question of any podcast that I've been on. It's the only reason why I took four people on my team. all the time to work on
Yeah.
bats. And 4 people meant Ludo, but 4 people also meant safety in the field.
Yeah.
You could split into 2 teams. You have just the right amount of logistics to do field work, and you have just the right amount of money to feed 4 mouths. Anything beyond that is too much for with field money. So it is super important. I think without Ludo King, maybe I wouldn't have even done as much bad research as I did.
Also, I think it's a great, I mean, for a team leader, uh, it's a great HR tool, right? Like they can bash you senseless in the game, even if you like, you've been hard on them in the field, right?
So that's what happened to me all the time. But yeah, but at the same time, but as an HR tool, and I'm not lying, as an HR tool, what's great about it is you know who the risky person is in your team and who the practical person is in your team. So there was, for example, one of my oldest field assistants, Jerry, he was the one who was the most risk taking. The other one was a mix of risk and practicality. And I was always calculative and practical. So it was, everybody's character just by how they use the number on the board. That's
Right.
great.
And amongst these inner, I mean, differences, what was the through line between all these people? Is there a sense of adventure in wanting to go off road and go into caves? It requires a certain sense of, because they may not share the same passion for bats or conservation as you do, right? Not necessarily, I'm saying.
Mhm.
They could be there for the money like everybody else. But so what's the through line in that?
I think I think all of them, what I really liked was they came with a genuine interest for wildlife. So of course it is about money because and it should be. I mean, people, my field assistants came from a community called One Butchers, who are a very marginalized community. I mean, they've been displaced from their forest homes and resettled. So money is very important to them. But what stood out in all my field assistants was also that they they not I mean, apart from earning money, they also saw all of these experiences as investing in themselves. So even after a night of bat watching, my field assistants, Shubhankar, have I lost you?
No, no, I'm
Oh
here.
no,
I'm
sorry.
ready.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I thought
No,
you
no, no,
froze.
no.
Yeah. So they always saw this as an investment in themselves. And for example, even after a night of, catching bats till say 11, 12 o'clock at night, they would still tell me कि sir कल bird watching चलते हैं थोड़ा. So then we would plan certain days like that कि ठीक है bird watching करेंगे सुबह. And then they would get to learn the birds, some of the birds from me. I would get to learn something from them. And and they've all ended up becoming bird guides as well now. They know
Wow.
there is not a market for bat
Bats.
guiding, but
Hmm.
they picked up their bird identification skills and they're doing wildlife guiding, bird guiding, etc. from that. So this is something that really stood out for them. And this is not just about getting that money for themselves, but also for their own genuine satisfaction of,
Right.
being out in nature.
So, I mean, if you can go back to your time in South America, I think it was Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken, where you went on a guided tour to see those white bats. They were probably hiding in little colonies inside the leaves. I mean, I don't know if it's assemblage or colony. I'm not sure what to call it. I don't know the
Correct.
technical term. But when you're on that bat guided tour, um, or your time in Borneo or wherever you've been to, um, don't you ever wish that I wish these things were possibilities for the people in India? And it's not, I don't think we already have night safaris in Pinch. Why not a night guided walking tour? And we have walking tours in Pinch as well. Why not mix those two things and make it into, sounds very fascinating to a layman like me. That's absolutely very interesting. Why can't we do these things in India?
Yeah, actually, the reason is just the kind of wildlife we have. It's not about the lack of will. It's not about the lack of opportunity. I mean, we're talking about India. I mean, you can make things happen just by throwing money at most people. Let's be honest about it. So but what prevents us from doing it is just that many of our forests have, the wildlife that prevent that make it hard, that make it a safety hazard for people to go out.
Right.
So if we are talking about Pench, like fine, you can do a guided night walk around your property, but to take somebody to a buffer still has, not 1% risk, it would have 10% risk, which is, big enough for any tour operator to maybe not take. So I think it's a good thing. In fact, night safaris, night walks need to happen a little more organically, and even bat watching, for example, where the Honduran white bats that we saw in Costa Rica are extremely well regulated. We need to do something like that in India as well, but also during the daytime when bats are sleeping in a cave, which means that you're disturbing them when they're sleeping. So it has to be extremely regulated. But yeah, it can be done depending on the area in India. For example, the Northeast, where most of the large animals have been hunted out, I think it's a good place to start thinking about more night walks to make people aware of, other smaller animals. And truly, the forest really just springs to life at night, and nobody should be denied to see that. It's a question of how we regulate it, because it causes way more disturbance than what a daytime safari would do.
I mean, I was speaking to Raza Kazmi, who's a wildlife historian, and he told me how a lot of these species have been wiped out in Northeast and in Jharkhand, Odisha, and there are these bachelor paths for tigers. Basically, these empty forests who have not seen tigers in years, unless there's some wandering tiger here and there that passes through. But I mean, what you're describing, it seems like those places are perfect for that kind of an activity where we know we don't have big cats or wild elephants and such.
But having said that, I would like to add that, that should not be later on, that should not become an excuse for not restoring these habitats for larger animals.
Right.
Fine, you have an opportunity today, make use of it, but be fully aware that, these forests, when the opportunity arises,
Presents
need to be
itself.
restored with the kind of wildlife that they have wherever possible. And I'm not
Absolutely.
saying do it everywhere. It's a cost problem for human life as well, but, this should not become the excuse for not doing it.
Absolutely. Of course. Okay. Let me ask, do you want an easy question or a difficult one?
Anything is fine. Now I'm prepared for both.
Okay. So I'll ask you the dumbest question that I got. So when I sometimes I'm standing in the shower and I think to myself, what is the question I can ask this person, right? So this is one of those dumb questions. In reading about you, I was the adage "bats blind as a bat" was demystified for me. Bats are not blind; actually, use their eyes for prey hunting and all of those things, right? So now this is another dumb question. The dumb question comes in here. If they have eyes, why do they have echolocation?
Yeah. It's because so most of the bats that echolocate are insect-eating bats. So now imagine you with those small eyes are trying to look for an insect in flight in pitch dark. That's not going to be very effective. So you need to figure out something that is more sophisticated than that, and that is where echolocation comes in. But now you are the same bat who has gone into the cave. It's still pitch dark, but what you are trying to find are your friends, are your family, are mates, or anybody. You're trying to do social interactions now. This is where you don't need to keep screaming. So, you don't want to echolocate. Your eyes are good enough at finding things that are 10, 20 times bigger than an insect. So that's how they use their vision. So echolocation and vision, their roles are sort of segregated. And the other thing that I want to point out is that some fruit-eating bats and some nectar-eating bats also use echolocation. They're found in Central and South America. We don't have the echolocating ones in India. What's interesting about those is that, and I think scientists are just trying to discover more of these. There are certain plants that these bats have co-evolved with. So, so they've
It's a pitcher plant, yeah.
Yeah, so pitcher plant, yeah. So that's a okay. Actually, pitcher plant is also a great example. It is home to a small insect-eating species of bat, not to a fruit-eating species of bat. But let's take that as an example. Turns out that that particular species of pitcher plant, the pitcher is more, had more ultrasonic reflectance than the rest of the plant. So, so scientists are just trying to scratch the surface of this, that in this vast forest, not only are there plants and all these habitats, some are actually trying to attract
Bats.
different kinds of animals in different ways. And this picture is doing that for a bat, where its picture gives more ultrasonic detection compared to the background and guides the bat into the picture.
Yeah, but not to
So,
eat it.
not to
That's the
eat it.
important part. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does it because it's Guame?
Yeah. So this pitcher lives in a very nutrient poor environment, and it's also not very bright and showy, which means that it can't attract insects to hunt. So what it does is it attracts this bat, provides the bat with free lodging, and the bat poop in the plant, and bat poop is very rich in ammonia and nitrogen. So that becomes the food for the plant, and the bat has free accommodation.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Um, so I was reading your research papers and I came across this sentence. And so I've written the sentence and then uh, next to it, I've just written hai. So the question is, the statement is, many evening bats have calls that start in FM and gradually end as QCF. Of course, I know QCF to be quasi consistent frequency. Yes or no? Am I right or wrong?
Constant frequency, yeah.
Constant frequency, yeah. So quasi constant frequency, and FM is of course the FM radio that we listen to. But if you could kind of help describe what these statements mean.
Okay. So so now we are talking about bat the
Echolocation.
echolocation calls
Yeah.
of bats.
Yeah.
And most species of bats, actually, if you record their calls and you slow them down 10 times, they would sound quite like bird calls, because they are literally high frequency chirps. They're really high frequency
Yeah.
chirps. And so now how do you get a chirp out of your mouth? To get a chirp out of your mouth, a lot of times you go from a higher frequency down to a lower frequency. So you're going like, chill.
Right.
You're starting at a higher frequency, going down to a lower frequency. And that is what this FM and QCF is, where the bat's call is going from a high to low frequency in very little time. And at the lower frequency, it is contained for a little bit longer. So I'm very bad at whistling, and I don't think I can whistle. But if I could, I don't know. It's a bit like chew, not pitchu, because pitch is going up, but so it's a bit like that.
Okay.
So, and of course, we're talking about milliseconds, so maybe this is how long the bat call is.
Right.
But so that's so because we can't hear bat calls, our whole identification depends on seeing a bat call and its structure, and looking at how the frequency is changing with unit time. And so some bats just go like, so it's basically like an inverted hockey stick. It goes like this. It goes like a J shape. And many others have a constant frequency, which sounds like, which would basically sound like, I don't know, when the mic screeches, when there's feedback and the mic screeches, so it sounds like that. Mm-hmm. So these are all calls, and because of this now, because of studying bats, every time I hear a sound, my brain automatically starts functioning into, what would this look like on a screen? Yeah.
I see. No, but this, if we start talking about the bat calls and the types of bat calls and the varieties that they exhibit, it's insane. Because let me try and paint a picture for you. I mean, of course, who am I to paint a picture? But from whatever I understand, right? So bats not only have this echolocation technology inbuilt in them, but they also do it. They have different types of social calls. I mean, they have different types of calls. So there is a echolocation call, there is a social call, there is a emergency call, like a distress call.
Yeah.
There is, if you look at their hunting call, you can actually notice how on the sonogram the call becomes more and more like the frequency becomes less and less as they
Yeah.
get closer to the animal, and it becomes. I was also fascinated to know that bigger bats have like a like a booming
Yeah.
call, while smaller bats have a high frequency call. Uh, they have a relationship with the wingspan. The call has a relationship with the wingspan of the bat. I mean, these are, I mean, fascinating,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also, one has to understand that these are not isolated creatures. There are these different uh, specimens um, are flying alongside different species in the same cave, or in the same, or even like next to two trees next to each other, right? And while there are other noises around, there's the traffic and everything, if you're looking at the urban landscape.
Well,
I mean, this sounds like an absolute nightmare, and the fact that you've been able to create a online call library. I mean, I just talk to me about it. Like, how does one even think of going around this entire system?
So it's obviously not. I mean, it's not very easy, but it's also exciting because it's really foundational work that that okay, if you did it, people you would open many possibilities for people to study bats in different ways, and for people to teach others about bats in different ways. I'll explain my point. So how we go about making a bat call library, let's start with that. It's basically about, I did this work in Uttarakhand, which thankfully has a lot of many different species of bats. Almost half, 50% to 40% of India's, of all the species found in India. India has 135 species. So now we go around catching bats in different habitats. And in different habitats, you end up catching different species of bats. Some are found everywhere. Some are occur in very specific habitats. You catch them, you identify them in the hand, and then while you're releasing them, you take a reference recording. So that's the process. You have this is the identified bat. This is what it calls, what its call looks like. So this is how we. This is what I did in Uttarakhand, and I've been wherever opportunity has arisen, I've done it in other places. And now the reason why this is important is that now if I have to go back to Uttarakhand and do a project on bats, I skip this whole process of catching bats. I can put out ultrasonic recorders to record bats and they're echolocating to navigate. So which means that, they're calling all the time. So just by putting out the recorder, now I have a very good chance of knowing which species occurs where, and I don't have to catch it anymore. I'm of course oversimplifying. Some species you can only catch and identify because their calls are very similar. But but beyond this, so that's the ecological importance of it. The public engagement importance of this is that now that you know what different species call like, you can take people out on a bat walk. So you can have a bat recorder in your hand, show them the calls that are coming right immediately above their heads, and tell them that these are the species. And most people are surprised to know that, what they thought was one small bat is actually five, six, or three, four different species, even in a city like Nagpur, Bangalore, Delhi,
Right,
wherever.
right, right. No, that's. I mean, of course, there's so many things to it. My yeah, the fact that another fun fact that I read from you was that these are not, even though they're very small, they don't necessarily they have long lives,
Yeah.
and they live up to 20 years, so 20, 21, 22 years old, right? And there are two theories around this. There's the internal heat theory versus the DNA theory. Could you little shine a light on that?
Yeah. Okay. So that's I think internal heat. Okay. So my first disclosure, and I'm not the best read. I'm not very well read with immunology and genomics. But my reading is as much as yours here.
Hmm.
But
Oh, well.
there are three different things. So the internal heat, what you're alluding to is because bats are animals, that fly, they are constantly at a higher metabolic rate. and the internal body temperature is higher than that of most other similar sized animals, which means that it's sort of in a fevered state. And fever is your body's response to when a pathogen attacks you. So which keeps them, which is also thought to be one of the reasons why bats are such good reservoir hosts for viruses, because they can keep the viruses alive in their body but not get infected by them. And one of the hypotheses is this. The other is the way in which their DNA repairs itself. It's, from what I remember, it's a very controlled state that, for example, let's take when our bodies are fevered, or when our bodies are invaded by a pathogen, our response goes into a frenzy. I mean, we mount a very strong response, and that ends up causing more harm to us than good. So, but for a bat, it's a very controlled way in which they do that. Their DNA repairs slowly but steadily. They their immune responses are such that it is just enough to keep the virus under control or the pathogen under control, and at the same time not letting them infect you. So that these are two ways in which it is also thought believed that bats tend to expand their longevity. But now there are two things to remember. Not all bats are long lived. I mean, there are some bats that barely live 3-4 years. They still live more than mice do. Mice being a fairly well matched size comparison to a bat, but they still live more longer than a mice longer than a mouse. The other thing is that many bats are also capable of hibernating. Actually, most bats, almost all bats, have almost all insect-eating bats at least have the tendency to hibernate. And in extremely cold areas, like it doesn't have to be extremely cold either. It could be Delhi as well, a winter in Delhi. Bats have the potential to sleep for 2 full months. They're only occasionally waking up. So what hibernation does to you is that you are obviously a very alive and kicking animal, but deep within you are really not very alive, right? Your heartbeat is down to less than 2-3 beats a minute. So that also often prolongs a bat's longevity in terms of years.
I think you somewhere also described how certain bats will also fly to other places to hibernate.
Yeah.
Which is counterintuitive, because you usually fly away so that you don't have to hibernate. You fly away from a cold place. Interesting.
Yeah. It's strange. I think bats do some. I think a lot of bat evolution is just that, oh, we should work towards something better. But then, you realize, oh, ठीक है, नहीं, आज नहीं, कल करते हैं, that kind. That, okay.
So, my last podcast was with this vertebrate paleontologist, Ashish Soni, and we spoke about convergent evolution and evolution in general in the crocodiles or crocodilians of the Triassic era. What stood out to me was he said that a lot of times these adaptations to the ecology are not necessarily as sophisticated as one thinks. Sometimes it's just a survival instinct that you do things just to survive. You're trying to figure things out. So within the bats, do you find certain adaptations to the ecology which are, you can't explain why this has happened?
So a lot of design elements, I don't have any, I don't have any, let's call it criticism. I think in terms of design, bats are great creatures. I think they're marvelous. They've got everything. Like, and also, while we're talking about this, let's clarify for the readers or for the listeners that, that evolution is a work in progress. It is not that, okay, we've become whatever. Let's take a very stereotypical example. And oversimplified stereotypical example that we've evolved from apes doesn't mean that our evolution has stopped. COVID comes, we are still evolving. We are affected by COVID, its first strain, but not by the second strain. If the virus is so our immune systems are and our whole bodies are in constant state of evolution, and that's true for every living being in this planet. So So, so I think clearly everything has worked for bats. I'm not saying that it hasn't. They're doing great and they will keep doing great evolutionarily speaking. Certain things that don't, I do not feel very convinced about myself is, for example, bats in the Himalayas. I really don't know what they do there. It's not a great place to be in. There's so many species. It's not a great place to be in, because and most of these species have their closest ancestors are in the colder parts in Europe and in Eurasia, in the temperate part
Yeah.
of the world. So
So we
uh,
have a lineage of Gondwanian bats,
Mhm.
as well as these colonizers who've probably flown in after we kind of merged
yeah.
into Asia and the Himalayas were formed. So these European
Yeah.
bats have come in later. Am I
Actually, we don't know because
okay?
nobody has done a time-dated
Right.
study of bats in the Himalayas.
Okay.
But from what we know about other species, yeah, actually, I don't know. I can't speak about the time, but you're correct in saying that a lot of our species are coming from Southeast Asia,
Right.
and some species are coming from Eurasia.
Right.
But now, because all of these Eurasian bats, now the problem with them is that their bodies follow the same kind of timetable as their European
So
counterparts,
what
which means
Britishers
that
were doing in Shimla, basically.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that is also a problem, and I'll tell you why. So now July this it May and April and May are not summer for them. April and May are spring for these bats because
Okay.
that is spring in Europe.
Okay, I
June,
see.
July, August is summer for these bats, and that's a problem because June, July, August is bloody monsoon.
Oh,
So now what do you have here? You have bats that have fully given birth to young ones in June when the monsoon is starting, and now you have to feed them when it is going to pour. So
hey,
of course, when it's pouring, there are a lot of insects, but you're not flying as much as you should be.
right.
And that's what it is. But the European bats don't have the problem. Europe, it bloody rains all the time. There's nothing, I mean, sky is overcast. There's nothing to look forward to. But, at least it is sustained throughout the year. You're
Yeah.
breeding in the peak monsoon. So it's not a great time. It's a warmer time of the year. It is the warmest time of the year in the Himalayas. But I don't know why bats are doing that.
They
And
haven't adjusted.
no, they clearly have because well, actually, I shouldn't be saying clearly. We haven't done a demographic study or anything like that, but or a study comparing, nutrition, the amount of nutrition that they get during the monsoon period as opposed to other times of the year. But it's clearly working for them, and so many different species are also, living in that area. So, but for myself, I can't explain it, but I'm also very biased about this because, being from Nagpur, monsoon is not my season.
Yeah.
I need the sun to be out throughout the year. So,
Don't you
yeah.
do you wish sometimes that they would move a little more left towards northeast where it's still slightly more tropical? They would prefer that.
No, I think no, because Northeast already has a lot of wildlife here. I think certain things are better off being in the western part of the Himalaya, where I can go get some respite from,
Yeah.
warm Nagpur or plains temperatures while
Yeah.
still catching bats.
But of course, now you recently started to foray with the archaeological department. I don't think you were expecting that. We'll come back. We'll come back on that topic just after the next question,
Okay.
which is since we are on the topic of evolution, and I saw that great clip that you made in Bangalore, searching for bats in the night. Have you noticed any specific adaptations within these bats? Maybe like how pigeons have become very accustomed to living with humans. Do you see something similar with happening with bats?
Yes, I think certain species of bats, for example, the least pipistrelle, which is one of our smallest bat species,
No.
barely 4 5 grams in weight. Um, that's a very human adapted species. But of course, the fundamental difference between being a bat and being a pigeon is that a bat will always conceal itself, whereas a pigeon will always show itself up and leave every trace of itself everywhere. Bats don't do that, thankfully. and which is why I think coexisting with bats is easier. So these bats are, some of the most urban adapted species. They can hide into the tiniest crevices. For example, the best example of this is once on in an apartment, in the balcony of an apartment, I I went out to dry my clothes. I was staying there temporarily, and then suddenly I saw, bat droppings on the terrace, on the balcony, and I was like, "Where did this come from?" I looked up. There was a small hole meant for, either putting a fan
Bulb.
in the balcony
Okay.
or a bulb,
Okay.
and that's where the bat was living.
Wow.
So, so they're very good at finding the tiniest of places to be in. But yeah, and then there are short-nosed fruit bats, which are also very common everywhere in the country, and more so in Bangalore. These bats make their houses on palm leaves. So the male bat chews the palm leaf in such a manner so that it droops into a tent, and
Wow.
then the bats go inside, where there's a male bat with his harem of females.
Wow.
And now these bats, because so they're drawn to the city because there are so many ornamental palms. So they're very, you often don't catch them when you go inside forests, but in cities they're very easy to catch. And the other thing that wherever, if they can't find a palm tree, they'll still just, roost in an abandoned corner of a building. So they're finding ways to live, to live in the cities.
Okay, so now my next follow-up question to that is, if certain species of bats are human adapted and certain species are, quote unquote, wild, does that necessarily mean that the human adapted species are more evolved and sophisticated than the wild animals?
No. So I think evolution, the one good thing about evolution, and if you get formally educated in ecology or evolution, the first thing that we are taught is no evolution is more sophisticated, less sophisticated. Every evolution is evolution. So in common language, you would use these words that, okay, the humans are more advanced than monkeys or something like that. But that is evolutionarily how you would say that is humans are the derived form of their ancestor. It's not the advanced form of their ancestor. So
I
there's
see.
basal and there is derived. There is no advanced and less advanced.
I see.
But what it now, coming back to your question, what it shows is that certain species, and there are several factors that define how a species is more resilient to urbanization. It could be their food choices. It could be the variety of food items that they can survive on. How bold they are in terms when faced with a threat and so on. So a lot of these things from many different studies across taxa, what we know is that the urban tolerant species are are just, they typically have more diverse food choices, or they can profit from even a small kind of food resource which
Now,
is found in cities. And over time, and it's not like many of these species evolved exactly at the times when humans
right.
came into the picture. Almost all species have evolved before us. We are among the newest species. I'm talking about mammals. But over time, what these species have figured out is that there is a lot more profit for them by being close to humans than being away from humans. And that is the problem with the forest dwelling species, that the kind of habitats that they seek, the kind of food resources that they seek, are just not there in human dominated
They're
areas.
away from humans.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
most of these studies that we do about urbanization and others are not about finding what species are more urban tolerant. It is more to find what species will absolutely not tolerate urbanization. Because if our cities have to expand, then they need to take care of those species,
they
not the
need
urban
conservation
tolerant.
first. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. So speaking of conservation, of course, now I think you're frequenting Delhi more than any other place. So talk to me about uh, your conversations, let's say, with the archaeological department. And
Yeah.
I have a suggestion for you. in all my expertise, which is why can't these archaeological sites use bat boxes?
No, great question. And I'll give you an answer ending with the bat boxes.
Hmm.
So now, so uh, we've had pretty interesting experiences at the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI. And no, I don't mean it in a bad way.
Okay, 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 okay.
Let's
Yeah,
be
yeah,
clear.
sure,
I
sure,
don't mean
sure,
it in a bad way.
sure.
Or maybe I do, but I won't get into it. I think I genuinely
Yeah,
like those experiences.
yeah.
So, ASI, the thing is that it's very different in every different place. Now, I'm speaking from my experience of Delhi. They also have a lot of turnaround in their staff, so which means that one person speaks differently, the other person speaks differently. So, uh, Delhi, the interesting thing is that um, so everybody has, everybody comes with their own idea about what a monument. Now the thing is that we don't have. Okay, so firstly, the problem that we're talking about is bats living in old historical monuments, and the interesting situation here is that the bats that live in those monuments are not protected species by law. The monuments themselves are protected, but over time, these habitats have become great places for bats to live in because they mimic a natural cave, they're old abandoned buildings. Simultaneously, the natural caves in the area around Delhi have been completely destroyed. So now, if you remove bats from here, they have nowhere else to go. They don't have a natural place to go to.
They're
But if
cave dwelling bats.
they are mostly cave dwelling bats, correct. So now you have these protected monuments harboring unprotected species. So why not think of a model where the protection of the monument can protect these species as well? Why do we always need these natural wild protected areas to protect species? Those are also getting lost to mining and everything, even more so in the last 10 years. But so now why can't we think of alternate models for conserving different kinds of animals? So that's the project we envision with the ASI. With the ASI, the thing is that some people are like, we don't have a problem with bats. And then, but you go to them anticipating that they have a problem with bats. So then, if that is what the person is saying, then let's try to leverage that to do more studies on bats, so that we can figure out how to manage the numbers of bats in the monument while thinking of alternate, mitigation measures. Because eventually, the monument also has a very important history which is tied to our own identity. So we need to preserve that. But but a lot of people, particularly in the heritage conservation space, I'm not talking about the ASI, they are also a little divided in this in their philosophies. Some people think that monument is an evolving situation. If it has become a bat habitat, then so be it. I mean, it doesn't take the monument away from our identity, but it is now solving a different purpose. On the other hand, you have people who want absolute pristine monument and in the state that they were in. So this project is where I am trying to see to figure out my own philosophy in this, because I know I've been trained in wildlife ecology conservation, but now to apply that background to heritage conservation and is a very different thing.
But have
The
you
ASI,
observed cases where bats are coming in the way of conserving a heritage site? That, for example, for
yeah,
these bats are dwelling in the dome of an old temple. And we know for a fact that this temple is going to collapse and it needs a certain it needs to be put up there, because I spoke to actually the person who heads ASI in Nagpur, Arun Malik sir, and he was pivotal in restoring this very famous temple that I'm forgetting now. It was stupid of me to forget, but this temple in Bhubaneswar. So he was telling me how the Britishers had tried to restore it once, but that restoration was not adequate in the current time. So they had to go
mm,
in and put in correct things to kind of stabilize that structure. Otherwise, it would have collapsed. And this is
yeah.
something from the 11th century or the 12th century. Now, if bats are inside this kind of a dome, what is the a recommended way for you to kind of, go around it? And
Yeah.
I'm bringing bad boxes into the conversation.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And if there is a monument like this, for example, even in Delhi, and we heard this from an ASI official as well, who told us about Tughlaqabad Fort, where a certain part of the monument, precisely the part of the where the bats are living, so there are in many chambers, in certain chambers are at risk of collapsing. Now, this is where these monuments are different from caves, where caves are more sturdy. They've been shaped by evolution. These have been shaped by mankind. They can collapse over time. So in certain places, so this is also what we call in ecology an ecological trap, where an animal has sought an habitat which mimics natural conditions, but then it could be at risk in that habitat. So, so here, it's a tough question, and we don't have the right answer to it. But this is another reason where bat boxes could be very important. And actually, in the whole conversation about ASI and bats, I'm not. I've never been. What do you call it? Dismissive of bat boxes as a solution. The thing is that because we don't know enough about how our bats live inside monument, what kind of microclimate they prefer, what kind of structures they prefer, that prevents us to some extent from designing the ideal bat house for them. It's not as simple as, putting those small wooden bat boxes that they use in Europe and bats can go in. Our bats like to live in larger chambers. So, so we really have to design a bat house, not a bat box. So, so here the recommendation is that, and a recommendation for all of Delhi is that we need to find ways to restore natural caves and which are harder. But so the simpler solution is we need to design larger bat boxes. To do that, we need permission to study how bats are living inside the monument, which will help us design the bat houses. And then having these installed in suitable public places wherever it is bureaucratically most feasible. And when you have to restore the monument, you take the bats out, but at least now we have clarity that there is an alternate home somewhere. So and then you do that, but despite doing all of this, we still have to be prepared for a situation that bats will come back to the monument. It is just somewhere that they have lived for a long time. So while designing alternate houses is a longer term solution, we have to be prepared for how can we make use of these bats in in history, in historical education, in natural historical education, nature education in those monuments. We have to shrug off that mentality that a monument is a monument of the past. And a monument also, I'm not saying okay, you go scribble and do whatever. That is the thing that is actually the biggest problem. But a monument's purpose will also evolve over time. And if it has become wildlife conservation, let's also be, let's not dismiss that as an idea.
Those families of bats living there have to be accepted as part of the ecological natural heritage of that monument, because they are probably living, and they are their grandfathers or great grandfathers of the same family living there, and they have a right to live there. We eat up their natural spaces.
Yeah, I don't know how a lawyer would argue for this. I mean, I wish we had a
Akanksha here.
Akanksha here. But I mean, if you take occupancy as a measure, these bats have perhaps been living there for longer than the imperial ASI was made or the current post-independence ASI was made. So since the monuments have been abandoned, the bats perhaps have been there.
They have squatter rights.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I have a question. By the way, are we good on time? You have a hard out at 3, right?
I have to go at 3 now.
Okay, so I'll quickly ask you, I'll cut off all the stupid questions.
Oh, shit. I'll also try to keep my responses short.
Okay, so I actually have a question that your mother would have asked you. What does niche partitioning mean?
She definitely would have asked me. The best way for me to explain this to her would be that if the two of us there are different ways. Okay, So what is my niche? I need food, I need time, I need space.
Right.
Niche partitioning is essentially partitioning all of this with somebody who can potentially compete with you for the same things. So, okay, so let's say you and I are flatmates, and just by the nature of how I am, I don't like to mingle too much with flatmates. So I will ensure that I cook at a different time than you. I will bring food, put the kind of food in the refrigerator that I am more sure that you will not like, so that I have complete access to the food, even though the space is shared. Um, I will bring people into the house, or let's say women into the house at different times when you are not there. So all of these are elements of niche partitioning. We are partitioning our existence on diet, on space and time. And this is something that happens out there in the wild, shaped by many years of evolution, where different animals have just perhaps evolved to do things differently so that a limited number of resources can be shared among them.
Okay, so this means that in the higher elevations in Uttarakhand, we have lesser diversity of bats on the higher elevation. And functionally, they are more or less the same because obviously, to survive in that kind of elevation, they need to be functionally somewhat convergent. Phylogenetically, they may be diverse and may have different dietary needs within, but functionally, they look similar and act in a similar way, except since they are occupying a smaller, literally a smaller space, and have limited resources. So these different species of bats will coexist by acting like roommates in the same.
Yeah.
Have I understood your PhD
Absolutely.
question?
If I had found you 4 years ago, I would have hired you to defend my PhD thesis.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. Um, okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to uh prioritize the questions that I don't ask you a stupid question. Of course, there
You
are
can ask.
135 species of bats in India, but last year we had 134. Um, Himalayan long-tailed Myotis. You described it. Is that a career crown jewel, or do you
I
want?
think so. I would say so. Definitely for me. I mean, it's not every day that you get to discover a species. And yeah, for me, that's one of the crowning achievements. And I wish that's not the end of it. I wish there
Yeah,
would be more in the future.
yeah.
But
So
yeah,
you have a hunch that there are more in Nicobar Islands, right? Because of the endemic species, there are more.
yeah, Nicobar is likely to have new species if we start classifying them genetically, which I don't think people have done. But the Himalayas also, I think Himalayas, not many people are studying bats in the Himalayas. It's a grossly underrated and undersurveyed place. Everybody wants to go to the northeast, but I mean, the mountains are really where a lot of discoveries are waiting to happen. I mean, in the Northeast as well, but everybody has their eyes set on the Northeast. No, very few people have their eyes set on the Himalayas.
Right. Uh, I have a whole list of questions here. How do you DNA barcode an endangered species of bat without collecting it? And that's the euphemism we use.
It's very hard because okay, I mean, endangered species you can DNA barcode without. I mean, if you're describing a new species, there is no way to not collect it because, unfortunately, that's how species are named. They need to have a museum specimen stored somewhere so that that can be, cross-referenced later. Because let's face it, I mean, what we're calling new species today, it's new for the current day and time, maybe, but maybe, 10 years later, when people know more about genetics or know more about morphology, based on current evidence, these are all new species. But sometime later, somebody will say, okay, no, there's something wrong about it, and we
And
need to leave that
when
room for cross questioning even after we are dead.
But wasn't there a specimen somewhere in the Khyber Pass
Yeah.
that you matched with?
Yeah. So of course. So because that specimen existed, we knew that this was not the species
Only.
has been described. Yeah. The species. So we know that now there are two specimens of this bat, one from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and one from Uttarakhand. So, but tomorrow, let's say genetic tools become more sophisticated. Today, let's say we hypothetically we're using a 5% cutoff that if there's a 5% difference, this is species A, that is species B. Tomorrow, when people learn more about genetics, let's say they think, oh, 2% is the cutoff we should be using, then what happens to all of these species? They end up being the same species as something else. And this has happened multiple times with birds. A lot of species, we keep hearing about species being split into multiple new species, but the reverse is also true. A lot of species are lumped as well into, which earlier were not described, either were described based on poor science or just that science has progressed since then.
Lot, yeah.
So they've not stood actually, they have stood the test of science. It's just that science has, they've not aged
Or it
well.
could be a subspecies of that species.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, unfortunately, I'll have to cut out a lot of questions, but anyway. Um,
I
how do
take the
you...
blame too.
No, that's okay.
But
How do you deal with your inherent pessimism for conservation in India?
I don't. I think I just stay
People around
pessimistic.
you have to deal with it, I think.
People around me have to deal with it. Actually, most of the times I don't let them deal with it. I think it's just that when I'm writing funding proposals, when I'm writing reports, etc., I bring out the optimistic side. But deep within, I don't think anything can change the fact that I'm a pessimist.
But you don't
But
come
at
off
the
as
same time,
one.
but at the same time, I think what I've started to do is, and COVID taught me very well, is that COVID was a bad thing for bats. It was a terrible thing for bats. But the fact that it was also the time when I started facing the media more often because there was an urgent need to do it. I've started seeing the optimism in everything now. That every bad thing does lead to something good. And life has thankfully demonstrated. So I try to bring that philosophy.
Yeah, like you said that, I think you said also somewhere that even though COVID was such a bad thing for the reputation of bats, those 3-4 years, but at the same time, the world was speaking about bats. So, I mean, there is a silver lining to that cloud, right? That somewhere they were spotlighted and today we are talking about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the final question, and then I'll let you go, which is, and I ask this question to all the scientists that I speak to. And this is obviously something I borrowed from Malcolm Gladwell, but it's the magic wand question, which is that I give you a magic wand, much like this, also this is my pen, but I give you a magic wand and I say that, you can use it to do any experiment, any scientific exploration you like. Budget is not a restriction, ethics are not a restriction, time and space, you can do anything, anywhere, and there's absolutely nothing stopping you. So what do you use that magic wand for?
I think I would go explore mountains all over the world. I would start with maybe the Andes, start catching bats there, go to mountains in Central Africa, then Himalayas, of course, and New Guinea. The mountains of New Guinea is something I would really like to explore. So so all of these places. Yeah, I mean ethics. I was being held back both by finance and by ethics for this because I think other countries, people there should be doing that research, which is not a lot of times how white people think, but we are trained to think like that. But yeah, I would go around doing more like just walking around mountains and catching bats everywhere.
Could you speak a little more about how you said that white people don't think this way, but we are taught? What does that mean?
So there's a lot of what we call parachute science, where white people, just because they have passport privileges, they have money, and they have everything, they've been the explorers of the world. I'm not taking the credit away from that. They have shaped science as we know it. But even today, we have people who think that they don't need to invest in local capacity. If I want to go, I'm bringing the ethics hat on. If I have to go and say work in New Guinea, I'm obviously making use of local people. What my vision would be to try and train those local people to become the researchers of tomorrow.
Right.
That's not something that a lot of
White people would do.
People have started talking about it now, thankfully. But for many years, that's not what how white people did science.
So they would rather be the savior of a local population than empower the local population to save themselves. I
Yeah.
see.
And it's
I see.
quite inherent in them to, to go and, okay, I want to go to this part of where do I want to go today? Put a dart. Okay, that's where I can go. We
Yeah.
can't do that.
And they can exercise that power to, they can do it. I see. Thank you so much, Rohit.
Thank you.
I mean, you are way more successful and way more intelligent than you would let on. I think you're extremely humble, and your modesty is very high. But I know what a privilege it is to talk to you. So thank you so much for dumbing
Thank
things
you.
down for me.
Yeah.
If you have any feedback for me, please let me know. Did I do anything wrong?
I would absolutely like to share feedback. This is the first time I think that I have somebody who's genuinely read about me before asking questions. Most other people, I'm not saying that, I've not enjoyed being on other people's podcasts, but people have asked questions thoda upper say about, okay, this is what he does, this is what that we know, let's ask him this. But with you, I think you've just dug very deep and found out what you want to ask. So that's my very honest feedback. Which is also why, I ended up talking way too much.
Yeah.
But I wish we had the time to talk more.
Yeah, same. If you learned something new from this episode of the Horsemouth podcast, do rate and review us on Spotify, Instagram, X, or wherever people engage with you the most.